So today we're going to talk about the Open Geospatial Web, and we have a number of panelists here, and the way we wanted to do this was to have it be much more conversational. This hopefully will be more engaging, and I enjoy panels where you actually can talk and get at the issues as opposed to just a bunch of people talking up, but there's a chance it can go awry. So we're counting on all of you, just like we're counting on all of you to help build this Open Geospatial Web. I want to set the stage a bit with the sort of vision of the Open Geospatial Web, but hopefully it comes out as we talk about things. And really feel free to ask questions at any level. We've got a really great panel of experts from a bunch of different backgrounds that will be able to talk to all kinds of different things. So we really want, part of the conversational thing is we don't know all of your backgrounds, where you're coming from, so ask, the crazy tech questions that you might want, ask the super basic questions. There's no bad questions, and we're psyched to talk about most everything. So I think we might even have some of the panelists give some of their vision of the Open Geospatial Web, but for me it's, as easy to find and use geospatial information as is on the internet. To find a document now, you search it, you find it, you use it. With geospatial data, it's still locked up various places. Once you get it, it's often in a different format that you don't even understand. Even the most common format, shapefiles, it's not like any user can make use of that. They still, have to download a special program. So, this Open Geospatial Web vision is anyone be able to find, use, share geospatial information, create it themselves, and then collaborate with others. And the ultimate thing is when you have everyone collaborating to create geospatial information. Right now you have a whole bunch of people building their own databases, and they're not working together in this sort of open source, collaborative type way. So the Open Geospatial Web is really sort of figuring out how we get there and not to see all these different initiatives as separate. There's Google Maps, and that's very separate from these traditional SDI initiatives. There's OpenStreetMap, which is building a base map from the world, but then there's also Google MapMaker that is doing similar things. So the questions are really, how do we all actually collaborate so that all data is just living and constantly updated for use? And the further goal for me is that this stuff becomes the fabric of our lives. Just like you don't question the internet and its usefulness because there's so many things built on top of it, I think in 5 or 10 years you won't even need to talk about the geospatial web. It will be all the things on top that support it. One thing to clarify when we talk about all this open stuff is it can get a bit confusing. And unfortunately, it is really important to disambiguate a few things. So there's open source, open data, and open standards. And they're all open, they all sound similar, but I do want to lay out the differences. And we have sort of experts on all of them here. And when they say one word, they will mean one word. Lots of people say open source data, and, those who are in it can sound kind of annoying, being like, oh, it's very different, and you're like, it's all the same, but it actually becomes important. It's a jargon that is necessary. So open standards are really the thing that underlies it all, and a standard is, like HTML, HTTP, the things that run the internet, and the internet is all built on open standards, and most everyone agrees that is the reason for the success of the internet. And a standard is not the source code, it's the ways of talking. So you can have open source software and you can have proprietary software all talking open standards. And you see that on the internet, you have Apache, you have Microsoft Web Server, but they all speak open standards. And this absolutely has to underpin this Open Geospatial Web. It will not work without that. So standards, and people meet and collaborate on those standards. Open means that they make these in an open process. Open data is the actual data, your geospatial information, and open means it's available to other people. But you can have closed data and still use open standards. Open data, there's lots of, and we'll get into this, of licensing. It's not as firm as it is for open source or open standards. And I think it's quite essential that the base data and a good amount of data on this Open Geospatial Web is open data, but by no means is it required. And some data obviously is sensitive, and you can't just share it with everyone because, especially with some of this risk stuff, it'll freak people out, especially if the results aren't super solid and you don't want to stand behind them. So the Open Geospatial Web really must incorporate permissions and keeping things private while having a good amount of open data. And then open source is all about the software, and it's a way of building software that's more collaborative and allows anyone to use it and participate in. And I think it's necessary for many of the base stuff, just like with the internet, you want open standards that have open source implementations so that anyone can use them and then can mess with them and improve them in different ways. But it's not absolutely required, and we'll be showing both open source and proprietary demos. But the thing that lots of proprietary companies find is that open source is a better development process, so even if their final product is not open source, they'll have many pieces that they contribute to. So that's sort of setting the stage. We've got a bunch of great panelists here from a variety of different backgrounds. We've kind of mixed everyone in, and this is part of what we want to do, is have a conversation. So you don't necessarily, we won't be, getting up here and giving presentations. We'll be talking with everyone else. And, if you all don't have enough questions, we'll spark a conversation among, a few questions that we have. But we're hoping really to talk to all of you and bring our different experiences. I'll do a bit of introductions to each and sort of explain where they're coming from. Andrew Turner right here is CTO of FortiUS1, and they run a really great project called GeoCommons, which is really the leading solution out there right now of sharing geospatial data. I mean, it's kind of the most concrete example of this vision of the open geospatial web. It's, started small, but it's the point now where pretty much everyone else is copying the ideas that they have. If you saw ArcGIS.com announcements, that's pretty much Esri being like, hey, we should do that. And then even my organization is starting this GeoNode project and really drawing a lot of inspiration from the things that they've pioneered. He has a big background in sort of neogeography and the Google Maps mashups and the bottom-up stuff, but has fully understood all the GIS stuff as well. He contributes to a number of open source projects and is really a leading thinker on open data. Him and I get into long license debates, and really if we start to get bored, him and I will probably just start talking about licensing. But he also gives a lot of advice to the White House and other government agencies on their open data policies, especially the geospatial stuff, but all that in general. So he's a great resource for us. Mark Lucas, sitting back there, leads the AWESOME project, which provides geospatial image processing for remote sensing, photogrammetry, and GIS. His work has primarily been in the defense space, in the U.S. defense and intelligence communities. So he comes from that perspective of sort of what are they doing with this stuff, and how does open source play in there? What are these big institutions? How do you bring open source into them and actually have that? And it's quite interesting where he's really stuck with the open source project as he's moved from company to company in all these different contexts. And he brings a great perspective of actually building an open source project and sustaining it in a real way, and focused on GIS and remote sensing. Sebastian Benthal works with me at OpenGeo. He's the project manager of the new GeoNode project. And GeoNode's a new project for us, bringing together all the pieces we work on. We contribute to a variety of open source projects: PostGIS, GeoServer, GeoWebCache, OpenLayers, and GeoEXT. The GeoNode project is really bringing these all together for a SDI vertical, and adds in Django for user management and all the kind of stuff. Bring users involved, have them upload their shapefiles super easily. Then also incorporates GeoNetwork, which is a catalog implementation, open source. So it's really about making it so people can share data as easily as possible, upload a shapefile, style it, be done with it. And he can talk more about that project. We've got Ben Weiss sitting in the back, and he's the sort of GIS mapping database guru at Global Earthquake Model. And his background's in urban planning. At is come into GEM and really help them sort of figure out what to do with GIS. He's really been evaluating a lot of this open source software for geospatial recently and thinking a lot about, what they need to do with regards to SDI. They need all this data. I'm not sure how much, the GEM has been, on the banners up there, but they're looking to build a models for earthquakes for the whole world. So to do that well, they really need great data for all of it. So they've been thinking about, not just, and they clearly have a decent bit of funding, but they can't pay everyone to, build up all this building footprint data. So how can they sort of leverage their investment to get more and more people collaborating in this open geospatial web? And he's hopefully later going to show some nice mock-ups of what they're thinking of how to get people involved and how to get participation in the geospatial stuff. Ole Nielsen works for AusAid, coming to us all the way from Indonesia. And he's been working on a project to help develop Indonesia's capacity to self-manage disaster. So in the last few months, he's helped build a high-performance computing capability in Indonesia to be the center to run these models. He's a computational modeler of natural hazards by background, so really comes from this understanding risk domain from really understanding the models. And, has gotten into the GIS, and for this facility they're building in Indonesia, they really need the data as well. So they're helping the Indonesian government think through, how to build this stuff, and he's been really excited about open source software and its potential to really help a developing country like Indonesia without having to be saddled by, huge proprietary licenses to share it all. So he's been looking at geospatial software, coming at it as an end user of SDI to support the Indonesian government. And did Ivan make it? Nope. We also invited Ivan Leenloff, and he'll hopefully show up because I think he probably got confused by the timing on the schedule. But he's a civil engineer in charge of coordinating the IT platform of the SDI in Chile. It's called geonodo.cl, and he really comes from this background of SDI building. He's been working on SDIs in Chile since 2003, and the past 3 years have been evaluating software for their geoportal, getting it up to speed, and then it's gone through 2 versions in production. And here he is. We're just introducing you. Sit anywhere. We're just mixing in with everyone. But he comes with a great background in, really what are the organizational challenges? How have they convinced their government to use open source software and, actually using it in an SDI context? They've probably the most advanced SDI in Latin America. They have 8 different independent people serving up, using the software platform to share their data, and then they have a single portal to view it all. And it's a bunch of different regions all coming together. So that's who we are. And I've done enough talking. Does anyone have a question?
What's SDI?
I was about to be a hypocrite. If you're going to ask a question, if you could use the microphone, that would be fantastic, because we're recording this.
It's a slightly bigger question. Sebastian, do you want to take a crack at it?
Sure. So spatial data infrastructure is it's a broad term that refers both to the institutions and the technologies around sharing data and managing data within, especially like a large institution like a government. GeoNode, the project that I'm leading, is an attempt at drop-in open source spatial data infrastructure solution, but there's many others that have been built often out of open source components. I don't know whether somebody else, Chris or even Stu, could provide a more complete explanation, but that's it in a nutshell.
Anyone else with questions? I can just be the awkward professor that just lets 2 minutes of silence hang before someone answers a question, but I won't. I'd like to hear from Ivan a bit more about what Chile sees as the usefulness of SDI and sharing this data.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you the first part of the question.
Just why does Chile see SDI as important for what you're doing? Like, why is it a national priority to share spatial data?
Okay, a couple of years ago, we noticed that we have a lot of technical problems trying to share data, because we just we were not sharing the data, and when we do, we have technical problems to put the data together because of the standards and many other things. But the main thing is we were replicating efforts and duplicating the expenses, the investment in geospatial information, just because we didn't know what we have. So the first thing that we noticed is, okay, we need to give access to people, and we need to document the information and say to everybody what we have at the government. And then we can work on the standards and in the softwares and many other things to improve the action of the government in a collaborative, integrated way. I think that's very important, and that's why we created a spatial data infrastructure, considering the technical model, softwares, and the main thing for us is the national coordination system. The coordination is the most important, and from that model, that is a distributed model. So our architecture and our softwares are built at the same way.
I'd like to hear from either Ole or Ben on sort of what you see the potential for SDI and the geospatial web for, particularly, understanding risk, modeling, sort of all of that. Like, why is that sort of interest to you?
Yes, it's similar to what Ivan was just mentioning. Our perspective is to develop a global initiative. And if you're going to have a global initiative, you need to communicate. That's top of the priority. And so an SDI, a spatial data infrastructure, can be envisioned in many different ways. There are multiple approaches, but one approach that we see is to set up a model facility that would be sort of a hub for computing power for calculations. And this could be then connected to regional programs. And these regional programs then can be a collaboration of institutions and agencies in their region. And our focus is on risk and hazard, and so the umbrella covers a big spectrum, and so flexibility in the design of such an SDI would be very important, and that's our angle. That's what we're thinking. But we're just approaching this project with an open mind, and so that's our initial perspective.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. Can I just add, like, from a development perspective, it's all about sustainable capacity development. And it has to be sustainable, because if you as a donor country pull out, things have to keep going. And it has to be capacity. You are not you're not required to put in a product, you are required to put in a capability for, in our case, for Indonesia to self-manage their disasters. And for that you need an infrastructure that's collaborative and that can keep going into the future. And we believe that basing that on open data, open standards and open source will give us a much better chance of succeeding in that goal.
Hello? I guess, I don't know. Hi, my name is Tipa. There we go. Hi, my name is Tipa. I'm a graduate student in systems engineering. I'm from Haiti. I know very little about OpenGeo software, but I essentially in January got very interested. And I guess I have two questions. One is sort of a nuts and bolts. I guess they're both mostly nuts and bolts questions. The first one is that the difficulty, one difficulty I encountered in trying to use those kinds of software is that I had a bunch of friends working with me in Haiti trying to position where those refugee camps were emerging, like the days after the earthquake. And one of the problems we had is that we were working with, for instance, KML, and so one of the very basic problems was how to duplicate those files. So you had very different kinds of people in different places working on the same, essentially, set of geographical data, and we didn't have seamless ways to replicate, to sort of superimpose this data. And I was wondering what's sort of the standard on that, and if that we could talk about that for a little bit. The other question I had was with regards to this question of standards. I mean, I guess it's a suggestion mostly. There are two ways I think that one can go about this. You can either sort of push for one standard to be implemented, or you can allow for all the standards to be able to talk to each other. To some extent, that's what people do with large data sharings. Like you have an API, and you can talk to that API using JSON or XML, whichever one you like. But what we make sure of is that there are ways to transform your XML files into JSONs and your JSON files into XMLs. So if if we could talk about that, that would be great.
Thanks. I think it's a great set of examples there. I mean, even going back to there's a key difference in understanding even when you dive a little bit into standards about XML versus JSON. Those aren't actual standards. There's like encodings. So one has brackets, one has curly braces, but it doesn't actually tell you what's in that at all. But what you did mention was KML, which is a fascinating one. The way I've been thinking about it and our company thinks about it is the accessibility around all of this. That for too long that the approachability of geospatial data and tools and information has been too complex. And I say this with my background in aerospace engineering, that GIS was too complex and unapproachable. So it was really left to experts only to kind of understand it and then therefore control it, either de facto because no one else understood it, or because they actually cordoned it off so much that its mind is protective and no one else can understand it or touch it, and I'm the only one who's the gatekeeper and access to it. And what's happened with the web is now it's become, the cost of production has gone almost to nothing, that anybody can start publishing information very, very easily. And instead of going and reading very, very complex standards documents, they latched on to what became a de facto standard, which was KML. And KML is now a standard, but only became so because billions of documents showed up that utilized it. And there's a lot of people that will say, that it's not the best one, it missed a lot of things, but people used it. And so it's one of the best standards because people are using it and you can publish huge amounts of information in it. And so when it comes down to choosing which standard, you really have to think about your audience and what do they need to do and what are they going to consume. If a tool is possible, and a lot of the tools are coming out to, you're right, that converting between any one of them actually becomes quite simple underneath the hood. So it's great if tools can publish out in as many formats as possible. So use something like Goodle, which is one single library that I think can convert to and from somewhere between 40 and 60 different formats. So wrapping that up, I mean, we wrap it up and we allow people to upload data and download data in about 10 formats because we don't want to overwhelm somebody with saying we have 40 options. But you can have the potential as a tool to make it very, very simple for people to contribute data or get data out in the formats that are appropriate for them. and then let them exchange data that way. And then you can get to finally to where you want to start layering information together. So you can say, well, someone has KML, someone else does have an OGC service, someone else has a shapefile, someone else has an API, and that's a whole other issue about data. But essentially, you can start pulling those together, and the term being mash them up. But traditional GIS is layer them together. And fortunately, tools like Google Earth, and we talk about Whirlwind, a lot of these tools and open layers are making it very, very simple to pull these different disparate pieces of data together and layer them together. And the conflation or merging them together is a whole other problem, but it's actually pretty amazing the fact that I can. And Haiti was, again, a really great example. Within days, hundreds of data sources showed up, and now thousands of them all these different sources started being able to publish their data out. And so it became another kind of it's a hard problem, but a good problem of I have tons of data. Now I need to do things like understand authoritativeness and relevance and accuracy and timeliness around this. And those are a lot of issues that are being discussed right now, but it's kind of a good problem to have.
Does anybody, including not in the panelist, have sort of insight on the traditional GIS way that people collaborate on a single geospatial set?
All right. My name is Melinda Braylon. I work with the Pacific Disaster Center, with the caveat that I'm here on the Atlantic, so don't be too confused for expanding. I think I primarily support the DoD, so I know I'm kind of probably in a different seat than a lot of people here. But the terminology that we use a lot is the common operating picture, which I think is kind of like an area that we seem to be kind of moving into this discussion, along with data portals and the like. Common operating picture, COP, is also moving into what's called the UDOP, which is the user-defined operating picture, which means the user gets to select the data that they want to bring in. And the thing is that there's so many different platforms of common operating pictures out there, is maybe we need to move into the common operating data and putting standards on that data. And KML is a really big one, to be able to ingest KML, OGCs, web map services, and the such. There's tons of Haiti data out there on common operating pictures. So I'm not really sure what you wanted me to go
Sure,
through.
no, that's great. And that's a lot of what we're getting at with this sort of open geospatial web, is almost this sort of common operating picture for anyone. Have the standards, underline it, that we can pull up for anyone to sort of get that picture.
Is this one already on? Okay. So yeah, actually, it's a great point about this, and that was something we've been learning as we've been doing more disaster and emergency response. This idea of common operating picture. In enterprise, they call it dashboards. Essentially a way to dive through a whole bunch of information very quickly. So this is one that kind of emerged around Haiti. This is using, for a little bit of nuts and bolts under. It's using open layers with EXTJS for the sidebar, controls with map server for serving up the imagery that became available. So people did flyover imagery, and this turned and mosaiced it all together. But what was amazing about this? So this came up free online. It was hosted by San Diego State University and the Cal 2 Center. And it comprises, actually, underneath the hood, a huge amount of information, commercial imagery from GeoEye and Digital Globe, some served up by them originally, some by Google. It pulls up OpenStreetMap data where people are actually remotely tracing imagery and on the ground gathering it. It has data from Sahana, which is an open source disaster management toolkit that came out of the Indian Ocean tsunamis, and now has been deployed numerous times. It was deployed in Haiti. It comes from Ushihi, which is an open source SMS mobile reporting mechanism that then serves data out in KML. And dozens of other data sources that all can be pulled together into this common operating picture. So a user, again, accessibility, all they have to do are click checkboxes. And they can go in and expect things and play with the data. But you can there's ways to go under the hood and say, okay, where are the data sources? Because I'm actually a tool builder or something that needs to go and pull this data off. And then the really, really amazing thing with once now you have the open tools and open data, this was something that the Stuart Gill from the World Bank had the vision saying, okay, all this data is out there and everyone around the world is using this data. The problem is it's all on the internet. And one thing that Haiti doesn't have great access to right now is access to the internet. So how do we actually go and take access to all this data and put it offline and give it to people? So we took all this dashboards running on a website, put on a hard drive all the data, cached it, and put it down on USB sticks to people where they could just double-click an HTML file, not have to run anything, no administrator access, all of a sudden be able to load up a dashboard and view the same data that was being passed around the world by all the responders and give it to citizens and ministry and operators on the ground. So it's kind of this really highlight of both taking the complex geospatial tools that did some amazing processing and data gathering and crowdsourcing and open source, and then actually be able to, because you can take the tool and deploy it down on the ground license free, be able to then hand it out to people. People can take the data and pull it into their tool. So if on the ground they're using a heavier weight GIS because they need to do land slope analysis, they can. They can take that data into their GIS, and it really kind of has this dissemination capability around the data, and then tools that are really lightweight for people to play with it that aren't experts.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. And then I think we still haven't quite answered your question, which is how do you actually have two people, working on the same data set coordinate? And traditionally in the GIS world, they haven't done it very well. And it's one of the things I'm really interested in. In software, you really see this open source movement of people really collaborating, and there's a whole set of tools geared towards it. You have your version repository, you have your bug tracker, you can diff and merge, you can commit to the same thing and see if there's a conflict. For geospatial stuff, there's a couple platforms that cost a whole bunch of money, ArcSD versioning and Oracle Workspace Manager, that will sort of let you coordinate that. But, there's not super great solutions. Our organization is working on some extensions to an open standard to do sort of insert, update, delete through the web. We can maybe show some of this later. And I think Andrew might be working on similar stuff too. It's kind of one of the next big steps for this web stuff, of actually having people collaborate and have a lot of those GIS tools online and have them in a central place that you can coordinate on.
Well, it's both central and then distributed. So, I mean, think of a wiki for data, geospatial data being a very key piece of it. And then I might have my wiki for my organization. Someone else might have their wiki. You have an open crowdsourcing wiki of this geospatial data or collaboration systems. And so they're centralized for an organization, but they're able to federate out as appropriate to other organizations because they're going to have different needs, different authoritativeness, different qualities, and different users on who's contributing to it.
My name is Abhas Jha. I'm the regional coordinator for the World Bank for disaster risk management for East Asia and the Pacific. And my question was a more general one, is that when we talk about open source geospatial data, I think the problems are less technical and it's more political and philosophical, if I may. The reason that all our partners in the bank could do the amazing stuff you mentioned in Haiti was perhaps that there wasn't really a government that had a strong view on this. I can give you a sort of opposite example. Last year, Manila was flooded by Typhoon Ketsana in September, late September. And Google wanted to do an aerial mapping of Metro Manila, and they couldn't get the permission for over 3 weeks to fly the planes. So at least in my region, governments are pretty paranoid about sharing data even within themselves, from one ministry and agency to another. So my question to the panel and to everyone here is that do you see any good ways around this? Or, I mean, we can have the best technical solutions, yet they won't work.
I have to say I totally agree. I'm from the Chilean government, and we have with the earthquake this year we had similar things. I think to get the permissions, to get the agreements, especially when the people who work at the government are very worried about the first assistance to the people who need houses, for example, are not so worried about the information, even considering that they really need the information to make the decision, but things happen so fast that this is not the first issue. And our experience putting information together for disasters or emergencies is when we don't have the emergencies, we have the same problems, or maybe I had to say we had mainly before we created this national coordination system. I'm not saying that we don't have any problems, but because we do have But I think in our point of view, having a permanent institution who is working at the political level and the technical level together has given us great results. Just an example, we created the minister councils that they are all 11 state secretaries, ministers, that they lead the system and they put the sign on the agreement. So that's very important. And the technical people who assess these ministers is saying them what we are trying to do. And this is permanent. So this is very important because at the field you don't have this just the software, you have people on there. So the capital is the social network that we have built with the professionals and technical people who is working every day with information and participating at the meetings. So
can I just add to that? I agree with everything that was said there. We recently in Indonesia presented the good work that was done in Haiti after the earthquake there with the OpenStreetMap, and we found that we presented that to a new rapid response team that's been established in Indonesia, and that is comprised of a range of government organizations, and some of them really jumped at this idea and thought that was fantastic, and they were generally the recipients of these sort of data sets, whereas other parts such as Army and the more established mapping agencies were very, very critical and talked about the quality and why would you do a thing like that? We already have this information, right? So I think that's a really hard problem. I think the approach we are going to take is to demonstrate the usefulness of a thing like that by working with those agencies that do benefit and establishing something to demonstrate the value. And if a standard can be made, like, for example, Google Earth, that is widely used, then hopefully some of the other agencies will see value in that. So that's my comment.
I'd like to touch on the standards thing for just a minute. And we on? Yep. The whole point of an open standard is that no one can kind of take it over and change it on you without you knowing about it, kind of a thing. So the de facto standard is all well and good, but it really needs to be defined appropriately by some organization, some group with a shared goal, right? So I get a little scared when you start talking about de facto standards coming from one commercial organization, and then everybody's going to jump on that train until that organization holds you hostage. So
I think all these my point earlier about de facto standards was they're interesting because they emerge out of an identified community need and community utilization. But I do agree for them to be fully adopted and promoted and essentially enforced. They become by standards bodies. So KML being a good example of it emerged out of essentially a tool, became a de facto standard, is now part of the Open Geospatial Consortium as an official standard that has version control and changes, and it's free of intellectual property rights, and all that's been verified. So a lot of these standards do have that, and I agree for them to adopt that. That is vital.
Thank you. I'd like to try to bring us back. When we think of risk in this context, we're very much thinking about technologies that can help us understand risk, map risk, etc. But people are the ones who are going to make decisions. And the rate of change in technology now, in all this software and codes and data availability and access to internet and mobile phone expansion in developing countries, all that growth is happening much faster than organizations and people can absorb and learn and figure out what can be done. I work in northern Ethiopia. There's one elevator in the entire province of Tigray. But very soon there's going to be a lot of mobile phones. And I work with the Red Cross, and I really don't know. I have a PhD in geography. I'm appalled at the lack of spatial thinking in my organizations and many others, but in part it's because we, those with the knowledge, tend to love talking about the techno stuff. How can we bring the people who do not know these things but are the ones who can most benefit about it? What is being done in terms of the institutions represented here or beyond to build capacity, as was mentioned before? If we want to create sustainability, we need people who will have the thirst to use it. We need to create demand at the grassroots level. It's very easy to do it in Haiti when half of the city has collapsed, but we all agree that we want to do it before. What do we have or what can we build so that there's more thirst and more desire to learn about all the fantastic things that are emerging? Thank you.
Does someone want to respond to that before we move to the next question? Mark?
My view of it is technology is going to solve that problem. I'll give you some quick examples. My background's in remote sensing and photogrammetry. It wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that my children had any clue of what I was doing. And the only reason is because now with Google Earth and NeoGeography, everybody takes it for granted. Everybody has a mobile phone. Everybody can take a picture and get coordinates on them. We're seeing that stress in the areas that I work in within the U.S. government, where we have these, just as probably in every other government in the world, we have these agencies that have had a charter and a mission to certify and bless certain products, geospatial products that go out. They're being circumvented all over the place because the soldiers in the field, the people out in the field, when they don't get the answer through the official channels, they'll get it on their own. And as we've seen with recent uprisings and so forth, this new technology takes off in directions that nobody anticipated. So I think being an engineer, the trends are all more imagery, more communication, more knowledge of where you are on the ground. And we've certainly seen all this in the open source community, where we can now begin to collaborate no matter where we are and what we're doing. So my answer is technology is going to solve that problem.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Yeah. We have everyone at the table has an advantage over the people sitting in the chairs. So if we could put the handheld microphones on the stand, and if people want to ask questions from the chairs, unfortunately, if you could stand up behind the microphones, and then Chris will be able to know when to call on you. So.
And there are a few more seats at the table if you just want to sit here too.
I'd like to address this question, and this is an excellent question in my opinion. We are dealing with these questions. We're thinking of these questions as we're building our tool and our project, and we don't have the answers. We're looking for the answers here today. Exactly. This is exactly what we're trying to do. One idea to facilitate progress in this direction is to create a tool that is basic and expert users combined in a place where they can communicate with discussion threads in a GeoNode type of a idea. A basic user or an expert user can enter into a discussion together. Maybe that would lead to more progress in this type of a tool. It's just an idea, and we're trying to explore these ideas.
Hi, John Schneider, Geoscience Australia. The question I have is really around the issue of data quality. And certainly, now Ole mentioned the issue around agencies such as mapping agencies and so forth being concerned about having information out there. Part of that is around, can be around issues of security or intellectual property or confidentiality, commercial and confidence, all those sorts of things. I don't want you to have what I have because, then what I have isn't worth as much, I suppose. But the other really is around quality, and the mapping agencies are extremely paranoid about being able to maintain quality and reliability and robustness of data. So I guess I'd like to put on the table that thought, the question of how within an open standards process you can not only maintain the access and the the ability to exchange information, but actually make sure that we can verify and validate that information. Thanks.
I think it's. Or did you have a response to that? Or,
Well, I actually wanted to incorporate that into the question you asked. I guess my basic point is that I think like this idea of like being able to make several sources of data agree is really crucial. And it's really crucial because, in a way, it can address your problem. In Haiti, it's true that we don't have wide internet access, but there are certain spots in Haiti where you can get access to the internet, and where if there is some like geo database online, we can access it. It might be through poor internet, through very low bandwidth, but we can access it, and we can put it to use. Much like I guess in Ethiopia, everyone in Haiti has most everyone in Haiti has a cell phone now. Actually, sometimes two, and you can always send text messages. So if you can have the softwares talk to each other and be able to sort of have people with cell phone essentially have a way to edit this data through things as basic as text messages. I need water here. It would sort of make the people actually embrace this tool, and would be actually ways for you to get data, and it would solve this sort of technology gap between people with second generation cell phones and geospatial databases that live somewhere in the US.
I think a lot of these questions are kind of intertwined in many ways. And part of it with the question as far as data quality, I think you do have two different areas. In one area, in much like the developed world with national mapping agencies, you have a lot of mission critical applications such as routing of ambulances in an emergency situation that you're going to have a organizationally vetted, secure data set that they know is right and is going to work then. Lots of other instances, even in the developed world, you have less criticality in the data and the data usage, and then you have more ability to be open. But also many times in the developed world, you have areas where you just have an empty map, and having something is better than nothing. And also and making it accessible, and it's like what Mark was talking about, things we talked about before, about having it that it's going from being the black box of the expert realm to being visible and open in the area, where you have lots of times where if you have a road that was last updated by the National Map Agency 10 years ago, the person who lives on that road knows the right actual situation. And integrating that system and integrating that process into the official processes of governments and national mapping agencies can have a lot of power. The question of how to do that in a sustainable and effective way is a very difficult one, but there's a lot of possibility there that can be tapped into.
I'd like to chime in on that. What we noticed with Haiti, and my name is John Crowley, I was working as a catalyst between a number of organizations responding, including the U.S. Southern Command. Issues of processing and verifying and validating information coming in from crowds, coming in from people who are submitting it via technologies that GIS analysts, or for that matter, people in the emergency operations centers, are not accustomed to seeing, has become a delay in the system. We have a serial process for validating that information. Usually it comes in from a crowdsourcing application or some other tool. Could be OpenStreetMap, could be Ushahidi. It's gone through some initial screening, usually before it's posted. Not necessarily in the case of OSM, but we have many eyes. Bugs become shallow. At that point, it then goes through another serial process where an analyst, maybe two, maybe three, will get involved with the process and try and validate and verify that data before it becomes actionable. That delay is something that I dare say is not going to be, a solution will not be found in a serial process. We need to find massively parallel processes in order to solve that problem. What I'm seeing from institutions is a desire to reinstitute control and find another better serial process for fixing this. And I'm not sure that without some kind of high-level discussion between institutions, we're going to come up with anything better than that.
So, on Twitter that goes right to this, which is how can governments sort of leverage, this community stuff?
Yeah, so I was actually going to try. I think there are about three threads here on quality, why should governments participate, credibility, that I think all kind of come together in a lot of ways. And underlying a lot of this is incentivization. In Haiti, the incentive was there's no map, or there's no map being shared, so therefore people will put into the one map that's out there. And then over time, that becomes the place to go to share it. So you can go off and have your own data set. But if this is where people are collaborating, then you're more likely to collaborate. And it goes back to why would governments participate, or why would organizations participate? Because you essentially put that carrot out there. Like, if you participate, you get a lot of benefit out of this. It's either broadly disseminated, you can augment your capacity because you're one or two surveyors running around. All of a sudden you have 1,000 gathering data, and then you can maybe go and put quality. You can go and verify it with your one or two surveyors, which I think then gets to ideas of potentially fit for use. So in a lot of cases, there were times when there could be the verified report, and that would be great. Maybe that would come out once every week or 2 weeks. But in the interim, if you're immediately responding to something and you say, well, here's the official one and this road's open, but unofficially someone said it's closed, I'm trying to go to a hospital, maybe I'll go to the other hospital that both officially and unofficially it all says it's open and it's closed. So just things like that, it becomes very, very easy now through technology, and now it becomes a question of usability on how to share that chain of information, that because of hyperlinked data no longer is just here's the road, but here's the road edited at this date by this person is attributed to this organization, it was viewed and okayed by 10 other people from the community that live there. And so you're having essentially these emergent credibility and respect around, you apply the things that are popular on social media sites, but now apply them to data quality and information sharing, where you have people coming through and approving them or commenting on them, and they're going to have different respect ratings because it's someone from the World Bank or someone from CNIGS or someone from USAID or just someone that happened to live there for the last 15 years. And all those things have different sets of quality and so different fitness for use, and you can kind of, where the tools are now going to be made available is the ability to filter those out. Well, based on my respect network or trust network, show me the best amount of data. Okay, I just need something, give me the most recent. Well, here's the most recent data from anybody. And so technology is addressing that, and what we'll have to do then, getting back to your point, is about how do you make this accessible and understandable for someone that is potentially a first responder and doesn't have much time to think about it, or is just someone that otherwise becomes very opaque because it's too difficult. It's become difficult to understand. Again, one, there's the incentive, so I want to figure it out. At the same time, people are starting to design and integrate into tools, I have 140 characters in an SMS tool. How do I make the ability to contribute information or get information out very easy, because I want to have those people participate and have it understandable for them. So,
just want to follow up on several of the threads going on here. In the position of somebody who's trying to build these tools, like I hear these worries and I hear a list of feature requests. Like the problem of like technology not getting into the hands of the people that use it is a user interaction design problem. Like, if it's not usable enough, then that's the problem with the tool, not with the people. If like an SMS interface is what's needed in order to make that useful, again, it's a problem with the tool that it doesn't meet that interface. What's essential is that all these concerns get into the hands of the open source development community, because we need a roadmap in order to build out, because often we're sitting at our laptops, we want to help, but the question is, what's most useful? So I'd be interested to hear if anybody had ideas about communication processes around getting these needs into maybe a central location, maybe a wiki, some way of building the roadmap to build out these tools for risk assessment.
Yeah, just an observation. Having worked with open source, what's enabled open source software is the collaboration tools. So you can be anywhere, you can coordinate very closely with a whole range of tools, and you can start to involve the users side by side with the developers to firsthand hear what needs to be done. I think the next major battlefront of technology that we're going to see. If you just think about Google Earth, for example, you go in there, there's an enormous amount of data, but you're alone. You're alone searching a lot of data, trying to put an answer together. I think the next wave is going to be these online tools that allow you not only to go in there and find all the data, but collaborate with other people working on that same spot on the ground in real time. So I think that's that same real-time collaboration that's enabled the open source movement is going to move towards the user communities and the online GIS capabilities.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've liked how this discussion has kind of bubbled up the big issues in this sort of open geospatial web stuff, in that, it really is about, how do we verify this stuff? These are the big questions of how do we get everyone collaborated, and we've sort of led through, you can crowdsource part of that, and you can make better mechanisms and governance structures around that. And I think the open source software is really an inspiration for this open geospatial stuff, but it's going to be different, and it's going to be a different set of concerns and a different, mode of working, and we're going to see a bunch of different ways. For emergency response, you might want a certain set of trust mechanisms. For people collaborating on butterfly parks, you might want another set, so it's really up to all of us to sort of figure out, what are the institutions we work with, and how can we start to tap into this stuff. And just like in open source software, it's not going to completely take over. Open source software is super mature, but there's still a place for proprietary software, and it's because people work a certain way, and you can't change that super rapidly, and we're all evolving to this more participatory, collaborative thing. And the geo stuff is a bit further behind, but it's nice because we can look at the open source software. But all these issues are completely important and relevant, and we all need to work together to sort of figure out, for our institutions, for the communities we work with, how we can move them a bit, and then point to other examples that are successful.
Forgive me for being obnoxious.
It's appreciated.
I am very scared. I come from technology. I'm now in humanitarian. I'm very scared when I hear this technology optimism, which has a very good reason for existing. So many awesome things are happening. But when I hear your answer, and I think it was your answer, that is, go to the technology and good things will happen. Sure, if we think that the users not getting it is mostly because of a user design flaw, and we go to the thing being designed and not to the people, what is going to happen is that the current gap, someone is looking for a road and has access to the best information. Someone else is looking for the same road but doesn't even know that cell phones exist. As a result, the person with a cell phone will get to the hospital and the other one will not. If we don't target human beings through the existing non-technology channels of communication to invite them to come into the technology-based benefits, we are excluding too many people. If we count on markets to spread the good news, well, if there's only one elevator in the province of Tigray, which has, I think it's 7 million people, this is not a village of 2,000, okay? Markets are not going to get to the places where there's the biggest need. So I celebrate technological optimism. I can see the awesomeness of what's coming. Even the name of one entity is awesome, something that speaks of it. But if we keep thinking of technology as the way to go, which needs to happen, but without thinking of people and how to sit with a human being who doesn't know the cell phone exists, then we're leaving too many outside for too long. Thank you.
I mean, I would like you back up and have more ideas from you on how to actually handle that. I mean, I'm admittedly a technological idealist, and I realize this. And I spent 9 months in Zambia, and my conclusion there was to come back and work on the tools that I can. And admittedly, being a technologist, some of the stuff I saw there was, these capacity building workshops where they would come and the people, they weren't ready for it. They were showing up for their $15 per diem that they pocketed to buy their meal for the week. That if you're coming to people that aren't ready for it, they're, just educating them that the cell phone exists still isn't enough. So I'm curious.
So there are two channels, and both need to happen in parallel. One is continue to simplify the technology so it's easier to understand. But the other one is work with those who work with the people to help people come up to a level that can meet you halfway. So if we have the World Bank, if we have UNESCO, if we have ministries of education and communication and infrastructure, and we have the Red Cross, and we have gazillions of small NGOs, and we don't go to them as human beings to talk to human beings, trying to help them understand that the thing exists, and if they invest some of their time in it, they can be better off. For example, we Red Cross train on first aid. We train on how to respond to a forecast of a flood. I would love to have some of you come with me to a meeting in Dumbabadi, northern Senegal, near Mali, to spend an hour with them saying, see this little device? Look, I can see water coming down the Senegal River from Mali. You are likely to get flooded in 3 hours. And if you got this little device, you could talk to your relative or neighbor or fellow fisherman in the other province, and he can tell you when he got flooded, so in 3 hours it will come. If we don't start from human beings, too many of them will be too low in their level of ability to absorb. And that's exactly what concerns me. Those who are too low, we leave them out because it's too difficult to get them up. That's not fair. It doesn't sound fair.
Cool. Well, I say let's do something about it. I mean, from our perspective, I mean, all my developers love talking to real people more. You know, they are in their sort of thing and do their thing, and they don't get the use case. And that's, I think, what Seb was talking about is, you know, have those conversations inform the actual feature request and sort of bubble down. I mean, that said, you know, I was in Zambia 4 years ago, and things I learned there are still informing the things that I want to build. We're still not to this offline syncing, and we're much closer, and Andrew and I talk about it much more, but it's just like, you know, you show up and people tell you there's no bandwidth, and you're like, oh yeah, and then you show up and you're like, wait, I can't do anything, you know? Like, but, you know, this sort of offline stuff of, you know, in disaster response, there's not internet, and in many places there's not internet, and how do you get the geospatial to connect there? But I think it'd be great. I mean, I would love, you know, people in this room to think about ways that we actually get that to happen, of the actual developers hooking up with the actual people. And then I think the challenge for us too is making sure that it's not too far, you know, that because you can show up and they're just on different planets, and what's the path to sort of get there?
Just briefly, I could not agree more with this. It goes to the core of international development, that you need that level of education first. In our organization, we got 2/3 of the people are about training and outreach, and the 1/3 is about the tools and the science and the hazard mapping. But you need to have something to show before you can actually reach the people. Because if you just come down with a vision and say, oh, wouldn't it be great if pie in the sky, then you're definitely not. People will be very disappointed. So it really has to go hand in hand. Thanks.
I'd like to chime in on that. We may, by looking at this as feature requests, be missing an important issue, and that it's not just about technology, but a mental model of the world. One of the things that I looked at, technology carries an ethic with it. Code embeds some method of thinking about a particular problem domain in a specific way. And there's some flexibility in it, but ultimately it has limits. They may not reflect the diversity of voices that's necessary in order to implement it in many parts of the world. And those mental models need to get integrated into the design, but we don't necessarily have a forum for incorporating that diversity into the design. It's not just a design challenge, it's a challenge to us to think about other completely different ways of thinking about space. I come from this from having done, in a previous life, being a medievalist and looking at changes to perception of time and the way that mathematics moved through European context and how that changed certain notions of in particular in my case, sound, and looking at music. I think we may be going through something like that with space. Now, many of the cultures that we're engaging with probably have a very different conception of space than our software currently does. So how do we begin to adopt those challenges? How do we begin to create a forum for incorporating that diversity of voices, so it's not just about taking it as user requests, but about coming to some understanding of the different possible ways that it could be thought through?
Yeah, I'd like to raise a possible impediment. If I'm coming from government and a number of other agencies, not mine, but have raised concerns about privacy and the need for some consensus on how to aggregate sensitive information, either fuzzify it or combine it in such a way that you can't actually figure out individuals that might be impacted by the data, so that it's made available, but not to the point to where you know a lot of sensitive information. And I'm wondering if the open source community has established some standards for fuzzifying or aggregating data that might be considered sensitive.
It's not something necessarily. This is where I'm going to at least pull out what Chris had mentioned earlier. It's not necessarily an open source thing, right? Because there are different people and actors involved here. There's technologists, there are data people, there are analysts, there are researchers, there are development people, and it's actually amazing. So everyone in this room that doesn't program, but you're in this room, you're already kind of crossing that chasm between the technologists and the actual implementation and users. So I think that's great. In terms of the obfuscation, there are a lot of techniques, and I think that comes out of traditional. This is actually where geospatial. A lot of things we push for is that a lot of ways that geospatial shouldn't be as special as it's been, but this is one of those cases where it actually can be really beneficial. And so there are various ways to aggregate up. So we work with organizations that will have point data for IDP camps or door-to-door surveys, and so you can typically aggregate those up very easily to either village level, district, province, or national level, depending. And that's a pretty simple way to do that. And so the point data is only shareable within a certain group, but the aggregate up to district level is shareable as long as you remove the names, you just have the counts and averages and things like that. So there are a lot of existing traditional techniques around that, but you have to then be cautious of, there's a terminology in the problem, modified aerial unit, that once you aggregate it and obfuscate it, you might also be altering the data and the perception around the data. So this is something that, again, it all comes from traditional geography and geospatial analysis, but it's interesting because now we spend a lot of time just putting tools in the hands of non-geospatial experts and giving them that button and making sure that, one, they get the right button and they know what happens when they push that button. So when they push things like publish, are they very, very aware to whom they're publishing it, who can see that data, and should I go ahead and obfuscate and aggregate it and then publish that, but what am I doing when I aggregate that? And so I think that's one of the fascinating. It's a specific problem where everything from technology, like I can have data, I can share it, and someone says maybe you shouldn't, and they say, well, okay, where can we meet in between, and what technology and techniques can I use to do that? And I don't think it's something we're going to solve right here. I think it's something that's one of those really, really important problems to keep discussing and figure out how to make that capability to share the data appropriately very straightforward.
To follow up on that, and the general issue of sort of reputation and data quality, again, it seems like an issue of providing transparency with respect to how the data is evolving and getting used across many different users, and tracking that as metadata on the data sets. It's like in all like the successful sort of projects of the internet now, there's this vitality of the creation of all sorts of content, and of course tons of it is junk, and there's a little bit of a buyer beware attitude, but what happens is that you end up getting communities that establish their own authority and are able to sort of put their stamp of legitimacy on pieces of content. And as people adapt to use these sort of more vital systems on the internet, they start to know where to look for quality. I think that as we build tools to solve this sort of problem, we're going to find that is a necessity. So as I publish data, I'm personally accountable, and that personal accountability is transparent. And if I start messing up, that provides an incentive. We were talking about incentives earlier, for me to make sure my work is good, or else I'll get fired. So maybe that's more technological optimism, but I think that there's a concrete way in which we can solve these problems with the tools.
Yes, I'm from the French Geological Survey, and I wanted to share an experience. In OGC, I created a working group on risk and crisis management, And I would say that it was not such a big success because it was not a quite good integration of people from the risk assessment community and those coming from, I would say, high technology of communication and so on. So before going to the developing countries, I would say that even in developed countries, there is still a lot to do in order to integrate both aspects.
Definitely. Yeah, and OGC, for anyone who doesn't know, is the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is the standards body for geospatial stuff, and they do it all in an open process, and they're really great, but they've also sort of struggled a bit with, the real bottom-up stuff, and I think some of the they've had some big successes. The WMS thing, what made all those pulling together was an OGC standard. But then there's been sort of even more grassroots things. Andrew was involved in GeoRSS, and that was something that really came from the bottom up, and you've seen GeoJSON as well, that really were sort of open source projects collaborating. Then GeoRSS, OGC put a stamp on it. But, and we're talking about the ad hoc standards too. They're absolutely essential to sort of have that international body to do it, but they've struggled a bit recently of how to really get the right people at the table to make the thing. But it's up to all of us to help them.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Just to return on this remark, I think it's the real question to combine the local need and the new technology. And I would like to bring an experience. I'm Alex from Predict Services, and we have developed a concept in flood alert system. The system is Wiki Predict, and it's possible to make a first level of information with very high technology data, and after, on the local level, we can have another system of diffusion of the data and information with a classic information with alarm, a church clock, and it's based on education system communication. And it's possible, I think, today to combine new technology, the wiki, and after the real need, it is a real response to the need and the local community. I think it's a future. It's very necessary to go in this way, and I want to testimony of this possibility to make a rail system is operational on this fact.
Does anyone have a response to that before we go to the next question?
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I just kind of wanted to make a comment real quickly, and I think this kind of goes to all points of discussion that we're having, whether it be how are we going to share the data and the technology, and also reaching out to the public and to the people that are not familiar with technology. I think with all our backgrounds being from country governments, academia, OSD, we're thinking very much policies, rules, regulation, and the such, and which is great. I'm very OCD organization, so I'm very great. But I think there's a lot of success to be had by thinking out of the box, and I think especially when doing reach back. On the flip side with gathering data, look at the Beer for Data program. Brilliant. I'll give you all the data you want if you're going to give me a beer, but my point is I think from as we look at a solution for all of these problems and that we're bringing up, that definitely we should think a little bit out of the box as well.
Yeah, maybe I can support that question. I'm Karel Heijnet from Deltares. I think there's one thing is this technological infrastructure, and I think it's a great development. You put data somewhere. But the discussions go around what should be put on, should it be secure, what is the quality. I think we shouldn't worry about it. In fact, if you start putting boundaries, you start to defeat the concept of sharing information. I think once you put it there, like in an open source community, people will come in from the grassroots or let's say from government, and they will start to develop their tools on top of it. And it's not that we have to do that. You just lay down the infrastructure, and I'm convinced it will happen by itself. The more boundaries we start to put up, let's say, the more difficult it will be to work. So let's lay down the infrastructure, open data, and it will work by itself. I think that's where we have to well, be conscious about. It's a kind of thinking. It's not just technology. On top of it, you need a kind of thinking that, okay, if I'm going to use that information, I'm responsible for checking the quality. I'm responsible to, let's say, for tools to make it work for me. We don't have to arrange everything for the other people. They have to arrange it for themselves. So it's a technology and a change of mentality that I'm not going to get a pre-cooked set of information which I can rely on. No, it's my responsibility to make it work for me. So that's my comment. I think it's a great development, but we shouldn't worry too much about arranging everything for everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree and was almost about to make the same point myself, that, you know, you have your open data and your open source underlie it, and that you almost have a danger of thinking too much, of coming into someone and saying, you need to get this and we need to do, you know, your capacity building and teach you this. The thing that's different about this stuff than what has come before is it's open, you know, so anyone can come along and they understand their context and they understand how to use this technological base to build what they want. And we need the infrastructure, and, you know, we want to help them as much as possible, but I do think there's a danger in sort of saying too much, you know, and we do have this basis and we need to continue that.
Yes, my name is Sofia Bettencourt from World Bank. I'm based in Lusaka, in Zambia, and before that I was based in Antananarivo in Madagascar for 4.5 years. So I completely agree with my colleague. I think that you need flexibility in the open data, and then it will basically share by itself. In Madagascar, you drove half an hour out of town and there was no longer any mobile connection. But when the cyclone warnings came, there was some way whereby there was one person that had a mobile phone connection in the outer boonies of town, and then somehow the cyclone warning was passed on to some person who had a bicycle, and that bicycle person just cycled to the next village, and then the conch alarm was sounded. So this is the type of informal systems that needed to be passed along. At some stage, all they needed was money for the bicycle. So this is, in a way, very much the system that needs to be put along, is how to get the meteorology, the international systems of meteorology, to connect to the mobile system, and then the money for the bicycle. And in a way, it's very simple systems of having the information flow that perhaps we need to share amongst each other. The Haiti system was also similar, and perhaps this is the type of examples that we need to share a bit more around the world so that we can learn from each other and keep it low tech, keep it open, and have lessons learned from around the world. Thank you.
Can I just make a very quick comment? I agree with that. This is exactly the evolutionary force that has been driving open source forward over the last 20 years. That there is openness and we can select the best products to arrive at really good results. And I hope that is going to be the same for open data.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes left. We were going to show some demos, but maybe we'll I think we might get this room after, so we can sort of show demos if people want to stick around. But let's get at least these last two comments, and then if anyone has burning questions before we finish up.
Okay, I want to comment a couple of things. I was thinking about how we put technology closer to people in different aspects, because we have extreme cases, but in the medium reality we're not always supported by the decision makers. They are not. Maybe they are like people who he was saying. They are very close to technology and they don't use it. So I've heard people don't love what can't understand, and that's a basic thing that will be changed in the future. I think I'm very optimistic. I think this is a process. This is a process that we cannot avoid. But I'm clear that techniques are different. So I'm totally agree with the examples. about different basic techniques. I'm thinking in the last earthquake and tsunami in Chile. Many people see the ocean going back, and they went to walk at the water and that's something that we can improve with education, and just saying them, okay, if there's an earthquake where you can stay on your foot, so you just have to run. If you are close to the sea, you have to run. And okay, and one other example, thinking on the to put the information closer to people and for different techniques, I'm thinking in social maps. I think open information means build the information from the people with different techniques, not using just internet, because we can build a map with the people who are living in the field or in houses in a city, and the maps represents real life, so are dynamics and not just map information in general, so they are alive. So maybe there's more technology in houses. I've heard this yesterday. There's more technology in houses than in governments, on official institutions. So I think it's a matter of time. It's a process, and we can try to support that with in different ways.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dale Hill. I'm with American Red Cross now. I was formerly with the World Bank. I haven't completely formulated this comment, and I apologize because I read the program to mean that this started at 10. So anyway, that was a unique spatial issue on the way the program was designed. But just to share an experience, I've been alternating between this conference and a conference of NGOs over in another part of town, Interaction. And I went to a technology demonstration, a couple of recent graduates who were basically promoting use of cell phones for surveys. And I realize this is not spatial information, but we were all social scientists sitting in the audience, and they were promoting the fact that you could get real-time immediate data on people through use of cell phones. It wasn't clear consent was being gotten. It wasn't clear the quality of the data, the representativeness of the data. And they had not spoken to the social scientists in their university. So if one crosses over from geospatial information to human settlements information, or to even this boundary, which can be potentially useful of the way people react to disaster information and risk, I just think we have to be very careful about, as you say, pushing the button, because once it's out there, it is no longer private. And what I would just urge is that there be some experimentation, and this is what I told these two very earnest young men, that there should be some experimentation, but that they focus on defining under what situations that type of technology is useful, does produce quality data, where the cost-benefit is favorable, and under what conditions should there be major cautions. And I think that is where I come out on this debate. I'm all for, open information, experimentation, see what people can do, but we do have to worry about the people involved to some degree. So I just wanted to, and please, the different disciplines need to talk to each other, because, they were touting use of incentives to get surveys, and there's a whole debate in the literature on this. And of course, they were only citing one source. So there's a lot of work that's been done. We all need to talk to each other.
It's just this discussion has been so wonderful, and I'm so glad that everybody's here. I just wanted to make one quick point. There's so many opinions and so much to be brought to the table, and this is so useful for us here. Let's continue this discussion on the understanding risk in the forums, in the discussion threads. Let's keep going with all this. There's no reason to stop right now, even though we're out of time. And thank you.
Great. Hi, my name's Jeff Martin from Google. And with all of the discussion that's gone on, I could probably talk for an hour on some of the issues and so forth, but I'll try to constrain it to a couple of points. And the first one is that what I heard here was a huge spectrum from build it and they will come to we need to market one-to-one or one-to-few. And I think that as a group, we need to understand where our balance point is there, right? Because if not, we're either in the ivory tower or we're spending a bunch of time one-to-one and we're not really working at scale. And so maybe we can find that balance point where we're using the organizations that have scale, that can communicate to people on the ground to disseminate the technology and the knowledge of the technology and how to use it and what benefit it has. And if we're talking about moving to an actionable item, one of the things that I might just throw out on the table for further discussion is, do we talk to NGOs and governments that are willing to be that connecting point, and is there, say, a unified program where they acknowledge that now as part of their mission, and they come to, we create the links where the dissemination of information goes to them, and then they spread it out, and then from that point, so that's sort of a marketing strategy, right? It's a different kind of strategy. Then that on the ground moves in a word-of-mouth manner through the population, right? So that's actually something we can talk about doing that will create the closure of that gap. Of course, first we have to recognize where that balance point is. So I would suggest that we do that first, because everybody in this room represented all these different points of view. And then we decide whether that or some other system, some other strategy, some other tactic is going to work for us. And then I'll just comment on one other point. And it was one that I'll pick up on from John. And this is, I'll start with an analogy. So I went out to the desert with a friend of mine, out to the Utah desert, and we ride dirt bikes. And he had never ridden a dirt bike before, but he knew how to ride a motorcycle nominally well. And I'd ridden a lot. And we got out there, and I don't think he ever got out of first gear. Right? And the reason he never got out of first gear is because once you get out of first gear, the whole bike becomes dynamic on the dirt roads and the trails. Right? You don't, if you're used to that, you can move very quickly and you're not actually losing control. Right? So I was frustrated and I worked with him. Eventually he got to the point where he was doing that. That to me is analogous to user-generated content and citizens as sensors. Right? As people are pushing this information up into these geospatial tools, the challenge that we identified here is that we don't know we don't know the quality of that information. I would suggest that the quality of that information can be moderated by the same people who are pushing it up. Right? We've seen that in all kinds of other social programs. And then the issue is, and this is I'll propose another actionable item here, then the issue is, can the people who are in authoritative positions get comfortable with the dynamism of the bike on the dirt road, right? So I'm sure that there are some PhDs in mathematics that can determine if one person verifies this report, it's probably got a 5% chance of being true. If 10 people do, you reach 99.9%, or whatever it is. I'm no mathematician. But if we can get to that objectivity in terms of moderation, and we can communicate that to the people who are on the front lines in authoritative positions who have a general suspicion of UGC, then I think we've got a story to tell, right? And we can actually make use of that, because I think, to me, that's the gap. The gap is, here are these people who are used to working a certain way, who have a serial protocol and are suspect of this other stuff. Well, this other stuff is coming, right? So how do we get them to be comfortable with the dynamism on that motorcycle? All right.
Cool. We're over time, but I think Ben speaks for all of us on the panel that, this is one of the most I've learned sitting on a panel. I hope that it was useful for you. We did less of the sort of talking, but being here was really, really great. The one thing we didn't get to do that normally, as part of panel is pitch the things that we do. So I encourage all of you to look at GeoCommons. Andrew's got a booth in the lobby, and stop by Fortius One, and he'd be happy to show you lots of cool demos. Seb and I work for OpenGeo on GeoNode and the OpenGeo suite. Mark's works on Awesome, the sort of GIS software. So please follow up. And Ben's at GEM, and they're doing a big outreach thing today. And I think there's a session tomorrow afternoon where he'll show off some of what they've been thinking about. And Ole is here to help us all. Yeah. And also, I think the forums are great to continue the conversation. Also, this weekend there's a Crisis Camp DC and Random Acts of Kindness. So essentially, it's a Crisis Camp DC is around a lot of people who work in first responders and developers and government agencies talking about how things could be used and changed with technology. And then Random Acts of Kindness actually has a floor full of, I think around the world I heard 500 technologists ready to build things. So essentially, it's a great venue to have that kind of come and identify uses, needs, what works, what doesn't work, and then actually have developers go and help build that. So if you're in town.